Hello and welcome to the first 2022 episode of Analysing Anfield, your tactics and analytics podcast, courtesy of the Blood Red channel. I'm joined after a short hiatus by David Hughes. Dave, how was your new year, mate?
Happy New Year, mate. How was it? Yeah, it was okay. Fairly quiet. Which, as you get older, I think you look a little bit more forward to them. You know, gone are the days of the really late nights. Not that I'm a fossil, but sometimes I feel like it. But yeah, it was all right in short, mate. Looking forward to a good 2022, hopefully. How was yours?
Yeah, it was good. Quiet myself. But we had a little bit of a quick Christmas break. Didn't have a podcast last week for the first time in quite a while, actually. But it's given us the opportunity this week to kind of have a take stock talk, maybe, where we look at a number of different talking points, run over them, what we think, and that. Obviously, the title race has changed quite a bit since we last spoke. And in addition to that, given that it's January, obviously transfer season in full flow, everyone goes a bit mental. Me and Dave are going to tip 2 players each for the summer to come to Liverpool. So, yeah, that's the first time I've done it in quite a while. So, look forward to that one. But first of all, Dave, we can't look beyond the title race, really, can we? Last time we spoke, it was tight, I think. Now it's not. So, what's your take on the landscape at the minute?
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm just bringing up the table to see exactly what it is now in terms of points difference. Yeah, it did feel a lot tighter, didn't it, last time we were on? So Liverpool now third, 42, City 53. Although Liverpool do have that game in hand, I guess, to hopefully, from a Liverpool perspective, close that gap. But yeah, those over the festive period, really, that Leicester result, the 1-0 defeat, I think it's fair to say me and you both didn't see that coming. We backed a fairly comfortable Liverpool victory. I thought I wiped a little bit with it. And then the Chelsea-Liverpool game, that was always going to be a tough fixture to go there, but to go 2-0 up, okay, if we're being honest, it probably felt a little bit fortunate to have that 2-0 lead, but once you've got it, you anticipate Liverpool have enough to kind of see Chelsea out. It didn't quite happen, and that ended up being really costly. When City in the form they're in, winning week in, week out, you need to kind of go keep pace with them, go toe to toe. Liverpool dropped a few points, and unfortunately, it's had quite a heavy impact on the title race.
Yeah, I think you can effectively rule Chelsea out for me. I don't think Chelsea can win it anymore. 10 points behind City, having played exactly the same number of games, and currently 11 goals worse off in terms of goal difference. So I don't think Chelsea can win it. And to be honest, I don't think Liverpool can win it, really. I said over the course of the weekend that Liverpool had to beat Chelsea, and if they didn't, I think Arsenal had to take something from City. And obviously, neither of those things happened. In a normal season, when you're not up against Pep Guardiola, I would say Liverpool have a chance and stuff like that. But I just think when City get this lead, when Pep Guardiola's got a hold over the league, it's pretty much gone, I think. And when you look at it's a bit grim, like, but when you look at 538, which we use fairly often in terms of probability and things like that, as it stands, Manchester City 85% on to win the league, Liverpool 13%, and Chelsea 2%. So whether you would look at Liverpool's 13% as a chance, I suppose it's open to interpretation. Not sure what your take is or not, Dave, but it's very, very unlikely, is what I'd say.
Yeah, just because I think City haven't really been lacking any sort of consistency. I think they've won every game since about October now. And they do seem to have this in them where they can put together a run of 15, 16, 17 victories back to back. I don't expect that they'll win every game from here on out, but it's just whether they'll lose enough games or drop enough points for Liverpool to close the gap. Because I think the issue for me, Josh, is although Liverpool still look really strong, they don't look as strong as they were, say, 2 years ago. in terms of consistency at least. So even if City did open the door to, in a way, aka dropping points from now to the end of the season, do you back Liverpool to be perfect from here on out to close that gap? I don't. I think Liverpool are going to drop more points as well. So I think for that reason, the kind of figures that we're talking about in terms of the predicted finishes, using 538 as the example there, I think that's probably, and sadly for people listening, an accurate summary where the title races are.
Yeah, I actually think individually in a opposing match, in a one-off game, I think Liverpool can match City, and I think the first 11 is better than City's. I've said that for quite a while now. But you have to look at the season as a whole at the minute. Obviously, anything can happen, but we have 20 games of evidence for Liverpool this season in the Premier League, 21 games of evidence for Manchester City. And based on those 20 games Liverpool have played in particular, I agree with you. You can't say that on the back of those, Liverpool have showcased enough consistency to go and be, whatever. I think it'd have to be 9 points better off than Manchester City over the next 18 games. I just can't see it. It's frustrating because if you look at the numbers behind the season so far, Liverpool have actually spent less time losing than Manchester City have. Liverpool have only been losing so far this season for 154 minutes. City 160 minutes. And Chelsea even better, 115 minutes. Chelsea have been behind for. But then if you look at total time in the lead, City are out in front. And I think it just kind of comes back to the whole, draws, wins, losses in terms of a title race. Liverpool have obviously picked up a fair few draws so far. Chelsea have picked up a few draws, I think. City just seems to be able to go and get the win more often than not. And I think this season, Liverpool are going to have a good campaign. I think it's going to be... I actually think it's one of the most entertaining Liverpool teams I've seen. Just tons and tons of goals. I know there's chaos and a lack of control, which is frustrating and probably going to cost us the title. But that as a whole does kind of add to the entertainment value of Liverpool as a team, I think. So yeah, it's a frustrating one, but I think Liverpool are pretty much in a battle for second, to be honest.
Yeah. I was just as we were chatting away, then I was having a little look at this, a little bit deeper on the numbers you were saying, and yeah, Man City have got a perfect record when they've scored first this season. They scored first in 16 matches and won 16. Norwich are the only team with another 100% record, but they've only scored first in one game. So, and then I'm having a look at Liverpool, and Liverpool have done quite well. They haven't lost after scoring first, but I guess it gets, in terms of when the opponent score first, it gets a little bit tougher. They've only won 1 out of 6 occasions. They've drawn 2 and drawn 3 and lost 2 of those games. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is, City tend to take the lead more often than not, and as we see when they do, they grind it out, which was a trait of Liverpool, I thought, in that 1920 campaign. Did really well in terms of going ahead and then just basically shutting up shop and being really difficult to break down, not giving away cheap goals, and obviously it was really key to the success in terms of picking up the points on the way to win the league.
Yeah, again, it is frustrating when you look further into the numbers, because in attack, in particular, Liverpool are the best in the league. If you look at expected goals per 90, minus penalties, Liverpool are top, got the best XG in the league on average, ahead of City, and then Chelsea, and then Leicester. I think it's the same when it comes to shots. Yeah, when it comes to shots, Liverpool are top again. But then on the defensive side, Liverpool are 4th for expected goals against, and Manchester City are top, and it's by quite a distance as well. The distance between Liverpool's attack and City's attack is fairly marginal, but the distance between Liverpool's defence and City's defence is quite significant, and I think you can look at that simply really as the reason behind why City are, I think, 8 points ahead, or will be 8 points ahead if Liverpool win their game in hand, I think I might say. So yeah, unless you want to add anything, Dave, we can move on to maybe more brighter notes potentially.
Yeah, it sounds very miserable, that, doesn't it? I think there'll be, a few of the diehards who'll be thinking we're being quite pessimistic. So apologies, it's not that, but it's just about having that element of realism. If City was to go and lose 2 games back to back, Liverpool win 2, then it completely changes it. And there's enough games for something like that to happen, but you can only really judge City on what we know over these last few years, and they tend to be kind of ruthlessly efficient, don't they, when in these positions? So it's going to be tough, I think.
What I will say is, which is again very, very annoying, is City's last 2 Premier League games, they have posted an expected goals that is in their bottom 3 for the season. So their last 2 games are in the bottom 3 up for their season for expected goals. So in other words, their past 2 games they have not played well, and I've watched both games against Arsenal and against Brentford. City have not been anywhere near their best, and they were the games that you drop points, usually when your performance isn't there. But what happens? City go and scrape a 1-0 win against Brentford and against Arsenal. I mean, we all know what happened against Arsenal, sendings off and penalties and all this sort of stuff, last minute goals. So it is hard. And I did want to, I understand that, like, this is a Liverpool podcast and people will want us to be going the other way, but then obviously the analytics focus in this podcast has to highlight the probability of Liverpool winning this league, which is very, very slim. But I did just want to give a reluctant nod to Pep Guardiola, because I do think he is absolutely ridiculous when it comes to coaching a team to win a league. I don't think you can get near him. I think over the course of his managerial career, I understand he's had the best teams all the time, but Liverpool have a very, very strong team at the minute. Chelsea have a very, very strong team at the minute. Real Madrid had a very, very strong team in Spain. And out of all those seasons, really, he's only lost the league twice, I think, apart from the first season in Manchester, which Antonio Conte won. But I think he was still getting to grips with his team and things like that then. But I just think Guardiola as a whole is Liverpool's biggest problem in terms of securing another league title. I know City have obviously invested lots of money in the squad. They've got lots of depth and things like that. But I think if you remove Guardiola and you put in another top coach, I don't think City have an 8-point lead. I think it's Guardiola, comes back to Guardiola, and when City in any sort of trouble, they never seem to be particularly under the cosh. They just seem to pass the way out of it. And I just think he is, despite the obvious benefits he gets from having a really strong squad all the time, things like that, and extensive backing and stuff, I do think he's an absolute ridiculous coach. I think he's probably arguably the best ever.
Yeah, I think they're all really fair comments, and it's no slant on Klopp, but you do wonder kind of, how City will adapt once he goes, and I think he'll probably be a little bit more not that he's not appreciated anyway. He's still considered one of the best managers around, but I think he'll be slightly more appreciative once he's gone, and whoever comes in and takes over City, and you realise that it isn't really a case of just putting any figure in there to manage the team and being successful. There's a lot that goes into those moving parts, even if you do have the financial backing that City have. And as I said, it'll be one to revisit. I think he's only got 2 years left at the Etihad now?
Yeah, I think he's got next. Is it next season? At the end of next season he goes, or
I think it's the end of next season. Yeah. Which is obviously good news for Liverpool. But I suspect in those years to follow, you'll kind of see why Guardiola was so good with what he done with that City side. And it's been a shame from a Liverpool point of view that Liverpool have finally reached the pinnacle again. Become one of England's best sides after years of nearlies. But City remain this kind of thorn in Liverpool's side, and maybe stop them picking up more trophies than the team probably deserved.
Yeah, it is a shame. But hopefully he gets off sooner rather than later. But yeah, in terms of other talking points that we wanted to address, Sadio Mane has been a bit of a talking point since we've been away. I think there was a stat, it was something like he hasn't scored in his last 7 Liverpool games in all competitions. It might have been 8, might have been 9, something like that it was. Obviously, he went and scored against Chelsea, which was good, and which I suppose kind of negates the point that we're going to make now. But in terms of the season as a whole, how would you say he's been, Dave? And if you look at the influence of scoring goals on perception, do you see what I mean? I think
Yeah,
if he's scoring a bit more, people don't think it's an issue. Whereas if he's not, people automatically think his overall game has gone to bits.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's firstly worth pointing out that this is often a consequence of such high standards. You know, that players tend to get this criticism. You know, the top players, and I mean, Sadio Mane, he scored 8 league goals this season. You know, I think he's got another 2, and I think he's got in other competitions. I'm not sure. I'll check it, but he's got 8 league goals this season, which for about 90% of forwards in the Premier League, you know, to have 8 league goals on the board in coming into January is, you know, was a good return. You know, it's solid, but obviously with him, it's not the case. There's criticism there, and some of it, you know, is I guess to an extent reasonable. I mean, he's according to, if we just bring up Understat quickly, you know, he's underperforming on their metric. He should have closer to maybe 10, 11 goals this season. He underperformed last season as well by about 3 or 4 goals. So you are seeing it. What are you going to say?
I was just going to say, yeah, just looking at those numbers, Dave, that you've got up there, do you find it a bit weird that this season and last, according to FBref, he's underperforming by about 6 goals. He's underperformed both seasons. But do you find it weird that the previous 2 seasons, he was overperforming by about 9 goals? It's funny how players can go through these periods where at that point I was thinking, okay, Mane's an above average finisher. He's in the mold of like a Heung-min Son or someone like that. And then he, out of nowhere, flick of a switch, he starts to underperform expectation.
Yeah, this is always a bit of a battle, this, because you're trying to determine whether there's like almost a reverting to the mean, I guess, you know, kind of a leveling out process. And I think to an extent there is an element to that, because we talk about forwards a lot, but we know that, you know, being a consistent goal scorer week in, week out over a long period is almost impossible to do. I think Mohamed Salah makes it look like it's achievable, but beyond that, I can't think of many players who consistently finish at a high rate. You know, it does seem to catch up with them, and they seem to go through these like fits and troughs almost. I mean, even Harry Kane, you at one stage you would have put him, you know, in the Salah bracket, and now he's kind of fallen off a cliff a little bit as well. I don't know what his numbers are off the top of my head, but I know they've dropped. So with Mane, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it for those 2 years from 18 to 20, he was just, you know, in his peak years, elite finisher, absolute flying, and then we're starting to see a regression in his ability, or if he's just in a period now of the last season and a half where he's just not maybe having the same, dare I say, fortune, or, you know, just not being as clinical, and it's noticeable.
Yeah, I mean, these numbers are Premier League only, but over the course of the past 5 seasons, according to FBref, which uses StatsBomb numbers, Mane's still in the green. He's still overperformed by 2.1 goals. But again, there was a period where I thought he was an above average finisher, and he was a period where I actually thought he's a better finisher than Salah. But then if you look at Salah's numbers over the same period, Salah's also overperformed, but by 13.2 goals. So if you look at that, I think that's probably another reason why Mane is getting in the negative light a little bit. Not only is he falling a little bit, but Salah's absolutely on fire. And this season, Salah's overperforming by about 4 goals. He scored about 4 goals more than expectation based on the shots he's been presented with compared to what he's been able to convert. So I don't think Salah's helped Mane's perception. Not that it's on him to do that, but I think that just kind of overall paints Mane in a negative light. But overall, I don't think his actual performances have been that bad. I think he's been much better than last season personally, but just the finishing at times can. Yeah, I think you can expect a little bit more from a player of his quality, but I suppose it was nice to see him on the score sheet against Chelsea.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you that. I was gonna ask if you thought what you thought of his overall performances, because I'm just having a look. I'm comparing some numbers briefly now. I mean, shots per 90. You've said you thought he's looked a little bit better this year, maybe a little bit more dangerous. I noticed he's averaging 3.26 this season. It was about 2.9 last season. So he's a bit busier in front of goal. Wonder where he's at in terms of things like shot creating actions. A little bit down from last season. What's he doing in terms of dribbles? I don't know. It's tough. Little things like there has been a slight drop in the number of dribbles he's making. He was 4.55 per 90 last season, 2.7 this season. But I don't necessarily.
I was going to say that's actually an interesting development that you usually do see with wingers, isn't it? That's one of the reasons why you eventually get rid of wingers when they get to the age of 30 or so, because they stop doing the things that made them special as a peak age player.
So so in your opinion then, do you think there is a regression going on, or do you think there's just a narrative form because he's not converting at the same rate?
I wouldn't necessarily call it a regression. I think he's changing. I think he's naturally changing. How old is he now? 29 maybe? Something like that.
So he's coming up to his 30th in April.
Yeah, see, I just think he's naturally getting to an age where maybe he's coming to feet a bit more. Maybe he's dribbling 1v1 a bit less, even though he's still doing it. And maybe he's starting to subconsciously focus on other things as opposed to putting the ball in the net, which is obviously still very much Salah's focus. But I don't know. It's not something we need to look into too much. I do think players generally naturally change anyway as they get older. But whether Liverpool still need a certain type of player and whether Mane will still be that, in a year or two's time or whatever, remains to be seen. But next on the agenda, anyway, is Luis Diaz. As of today, we are recording on the Thursday. He is in the news, really, in the Portuguese news at least, as a potential target for Liverpool, one to watch type thing. But I think it's interesting, Dave, that he was actually linked with Everton over the course of the last summer window.
Yeah. So I think it was a little bit more than just paper talk as well. I think the idea was Everton wanted to sign him. Sadly, he's a good player, but there was a few issues in terms of the transfer fee. Everton have basically really hamstrung by FFP. So they were going to try and arrange some form of swap deal with him, maybe a bit of cash and James Rodriguez. But for whatever reason, didn't work with Rodriguez. Not sure if he didn't want to go, or it was a little bit of a grey area anyway. But the deal didn't end up happening. And Diaz has since continued to have a really, really strong campaign this season with Porto. I don't know if his numbers are as good as last year, and we might get into them now, but he still looks a really good player. And now, the kind of next tier up of top sides. So, regulars in the Champions League, etc. So your Liverpools, for example, are starting to pay attention to him, and it's easy to see why. He's got a really exciting profile.
Yeah, he's 24 years old at the minute, so he is at the typical age, I suppose, that Liverpool usually target. And he is a left-sided player who uses his right foot. So I suppose in Liverpool's system, he would be Sadio Mane. But I'm not sure on it. I don't think there's much in it. I'll be surprised if there's anything in this. I do think he's a good player. So far this season, he's scored 12 goals. None of those penalties. This is in the Portuguese First Division. 3 assists as well, and he's only behind Darwin Núñez in the Portuguese top league, but pretty sure he's took penalties. Oh no, he hasn't. So he's second top scorer in the Portuguese league, playing from a starting wide position, and he's tricky, he's direct, likes to dribble. Liverpool have played against him this year. I do think he was probably their biggest threat, but I just can't see it. Porto seems to be pushing the news rather than anybody else. They seem to be wanting more than he's really worth, I'd say. And I also think that the general his conduct on the pitch, I don't think is what Liverpool typically like. Not that he's like he's in a specific way, I don't like that, but I think he's too inclined to play act a little bit. I think he's a bit dramatic when it comes to getting tackled, and just looking at the players Klopp has signed since he's come to Liverpool. Liverpool don't usually buy players like that. You know, it takes quite a bit for Sadio Mane to go down. Same for Firmino. Some would argue against this, but I think the same with Salah. I think Salah's more likely to go down when he's been given a real penalty opportunity, as opposed to when he's getting heavy physical aggression towards him or anything like that. And I think Diaz just kind of has a bit of that about him that I don't think Liverpool would like, but that's just kind of my opinion. That's a bit of just opinion, I suppose.
Yeah. Weirdly, I'm a little bit more in the camp that I could see him being on the short list if one exists. Just because I feel like he does offer a lot. I mean, you touched on it there. You know, obviously being predominantly playing on the left, but with that being that kind of right-footed, so he's a real danger cutting in. I think he's a really good dribbler. Headache for defenders because you kind of have to tie up. You know, you try and get tight to him, but he seems to win a lot of fouls when you do that. Give him too much space, and he tends to punish you. So I think he's just got a lot of traits that could see him do well at Liverpool. And I think the reason, I mean, he's 24 now. I think the reason he was a little bit slow to come on the radar was he wasn't really having those contributions in terms of, you know, initially goals and assists. His first season in Porto, 1920, he had 6 goals, 2 assists. Then last season he built on that a little bit, same number of goals, but 5 assists. And this is just, I'm only looking at league here. There was goals in Europe as well, but you know, this season it's 12 goals, 15 appearances, plus another 3 assists. So I think he's just starting to really, you know, grow, and which ties in with him reaching his kind of peakish years. You know, he'll be 25 next birthday. So I don't know. I feel like it could be a possibility, to be honest, Josh. But the issue, when you did kind of touch on it, was, you know, Porto know he's kind of their gem. They'll know they're going to lose him at some point, and they'll want a lot of money for them. And I just don't know if, with the interest around them, I don't know if Liverpool will be the one willing to, you know, pay big bucks.
Yeah, I actually agree with what you're saying. I do think he's good enough to be on Liverpool's shortlist. I think Liverpool will be aware of him and things like that. And again, I wouldn't put it past him to do well if he did come to Liverpool, play within Liverpool's system and things like that. I do think he's got all those to his game. I just think, you know, he'll have 2 years left on his deal this summer. So I suppose you could get him for a reasonable price, but Porto seems to be asking for a bit more. And I think more than anything, I would be surprised if Liverpool look at him as the best wide forward they can get this summer. I think they would go for. I think there's better options out there personally. But I do think he's good. I do think he's quite an active, busy player. He's very physical and things like that, very fast and stuff. So I do think he's in the mould, and I agree with you that he will be on the shortlist and stuff. But I do think I would be surprised if Liverpool made a bid for him. Especially, you know, considering he's coming from, he's played all right in the Champions League, but he's coming from a league that is nowhere near the standard of the Premier League. So there's an element of risk attached to that when you sign those players. But I don't know. It's one to watch. Keep track of that one. Next on the agenda, I wanted to speak about Thiago again. So I seem to speak about him every week, but I think lately in particular we are seeing what a Thiago-less Liverpool can look like. And I think specifically against Chelsea, it did not help having him absent, basically. But I think people have used the Chelsea game to talk about, how we're missing Wijnaldum and stuff like that. I've said so many times, I think Thiago was the Wijnaldum replacement, and I actually think he's a upgrade when he's on the pitch. But that's the big thing. When he's on the pitch, he's not on the pitch anywhere near as much as Wijnaldum is. So it's an interesting one to assess, because as a Wijnaldum replacement, as I said, I think he's an upgrade. I think he's a better player. I think he offers more value on the pitch, but he's not there as much. So, how do you judge that? Does that then make them level almost as, or maybe even give Wijnaldum a bit of a boost? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because the thing that we talked about Wijnaldum a lot, didn't he, when we were here? Because he was someone who tends to split the fan base a little bit. Most liked him, but just in terms of what he brought to the side. But he was just an ever-present. He was consistently fit, which in itself is a huge trait, one that's often overlooked. And obviously, because of various injuries and COVID-related issues, there's been a bit of the spotlight on Liverpool's midfield, because it just looked a little bit bare at times, hasn't it? And I guess to answer your question, it probably does level out the playing field a little bit between them, because there's little doubt that as a technical player, Thiago's much better. I think he brings much more positive actions in terms of going forward in possession. But that's a little bit of a moot point if you're not on the pitch, and I think that is his issue. And what I would say is, a couple of the other big injury issues Liverpool have had, specifically the ones where it was like Van Dijk contact injury, Gomez bit of a freak knee injury, Elliott. I thought Elliott was probably another. You talking about replacements, Josh? I think Elliott was a kind of natural replacement, and we saw how important he could have been. Then he picks up an injury that's a bit of a freak injury. It's not as if he's breaking down. It's a contact injury, isn't it? So I think if it's contact injuries, then it's okay. But when it's regularly breaking down for various reasons, which seems to happen a little bit with Thiago, then that's when it's a bit more problematic.
Yeah, but I think when he's on the pitch, he does have such an influence on Liverpool. So far this season, he's played 9. He started 9 matches in all competitions. In those 9, Liverpool have won all 9, scored 25, and conceded 2. And I shared a little viz during the week of just goal difference. You can look at every player in the Premier League who's played at least 600 minutes, and you can look at what the goal difference for his team has been when that player is on the pitch. And obviously we use expected numbers, because sometimes football can deliver mad stuff. So mad occurrences such as penalties, refereeing decisions, fluke goals from 40 yards and stuff like that. So if we look at expected goal difference, which people will have seen on the viz during the week, Thiago is top on a per 90 basis for the whole Premier League. Whenever he's on a pitch, Liverpool are about 2.4 expected goals ahead of their opponents. The top of this table, I should say, is all Manchester City players, basically, because they've got the best goal difference, and then a few Liverpool players or whatever. So second on the list is Aymeric Laporte, and then Ilkay Gundogan, and then Jack Grealish, and there's very little in all those, though. They're all about the same, but Thiago's pretty much on his own at the top when it comes to goal difference when he's on the pitch, expected goal difference. Liverpool's next best player by the same numbers is Van Dijk. Liverpool are about 1.6 goals better off than their opponents when Van Dijk's on the pitch. And then there's a big group of Liverpool players below that. Matip, Fabinho, Trent, Henderson, all fairly similar. But yeah, just Thiago as a whole, what he offers on the pitch and what Liverpool are like when he's not there, I think he's so important. And obviously last season there was a bit of debate as to whether he's even a good player or whatever. I think it was a debate at one point.
Did they get that dark at one point? Yeah.
Yeah, it was getting a bit daft at one point. But I think you can see this season, particularly with Liverpool having all the other departments working as normal. I think you can see what it's like when he's not there. And against Chelsea, I looked at the numbers the other day. And I know this doesn't always capture it, but if you look at the Chelsea game, Liverpool started James Milner and Jordan Henderson as the team's two number 8s in central midfield. Right, central midfield. James Milner posted a pass completion of 61%. And Jordan Henderson posted a pass completion of 69%. That's in central midfield for the top side wanting to dominate the ball. Now, again, that doesn't show everything, and there's context to it. But I feel like if Thiago's on the pitch, Thiago's posting at least 80%, in my opinion, from the start of the game at least. And I think that composure just helps you gain a foothold on the ball, gain a bit of control, lose a bit of chaos. And that was what I felt Liverpool needed in that game.
Yeah. I was trying to work out who actually won the possession on the day. Was it?
It was.
Chelsea, wasn't it? Chelsea 55. Yeah, I'd agree. So the big thing with obviously pass success rates, and the reason why we're probably approaching it a bit cautiously, I should say, is because it can sometimes be inflated in terms of what it's worth. But I think you're spot on this occasion, because it's not as if we're talking of a difference between, X player posted 88% and someone else posted 92%. Those numbers you've just said are really low. And if you think about the importance of that position, if you think about what it entails in terms of control and possession, moving the ball from side to side, playing it forward, just keeping play, recycling the ball, ticking it over, that is really low. And that to me says two things. That they struggled to do it successfully, and perhaps they were a little bit frantic in passing choices. And I think both of those things, Josh, probably would match up with the eye test in terms of what we saw in the game from both of them. I actually thought, on the subject of being a little bit frantic, I don't know what about you, but if we use Henderson as the example, I thought a lot of times, and this is not something I can necessarily just capture in numbers, but just from while I was watching, I felt like he was a little bit prone to pressing the ball a lot more than maybe thinking about marking space and thinking about the overall structure of the team. And I felt like it just left too many gaps, or a couple of people exposed around him. I'm not picking on him only. I'm just using that as an example of the kind of frantic nature. At times, I thought that the midfield was in terms of how it was approaching things.
Yeah, I did think, to be honest, it was one of Henderson's worst games in a while, actually. I am generally a fan of Henderson. I think Henderson starts in Liverpool's best team, but this was one of his bad ones. The only starter who posted a lower passing accuracy than Milner was Jota, who's obviously a forward playing in highly pressurised areas high up the pitch. And the only two starters who posted a lower passing accuracy than Henderson, except for Milner, were Jota and Tsimikas. Again, Tsimikas is taking a few more risks, playing on the flanks and stuff like that. But I think in central midfield, you just expect a little bit more. And people thought Fabinho had a bad game. For a bit of context, Fabinho posted 89%. Only actually misplaced 5 passes, which placed him top of Liverpool on the day. But again, pass completion numbers, there's a lot of context in there that's lacking on a lot of occasions. But I think in this case, it does capture one of the issues on the day. So for the final 20 minutes or so, the fun part, I suppose, Dave, transfers.
So
we agreed beforehand that the two problem positions, maybe the two problem areas for Liverpool to upgrade, are in midfield and up front, basically. So a forward and a midfielder. We left it open to interpretation as to whether you think a midfielder should be an 8 or a 6 or a striker or a left-sided forward or whatever, number 10. I don't know Dave's answers. Dave doesn't know mine, as usual. So, Dave, I'll let you kick off, mate. We'll start with midfielders.
Yeah. So I feel a little bit disappointed this time because I feel like we normally like to bring, maybe a little bit more under the radar selections, and maybe you have. But on this occasion, I've just gone for a little bit more realistic because I know we may look at doing one of our transfer shows in the next week or two. So in terms of midfielder, I'm going to highlight Frank Kessie, AC Milan. Not very out the box, but I think you're looking at a really good profile from a Liverpool perspective, who potentially could be available in the summer. Obviously, I think he'd be an interesting player based on abilities alone. But there's this added level of appeal in that, his contract's due to expire in the summer, and he's not. It doesn't look like he's going to agree on an extension, which means somebody can potentially benefit from getting him for free. And from a Liverpool standpoint, I think he's got loads of traits that are really beneficial. He can be quite versatile. He tends to play in a double pivot because Milan usually use a 4-2-3-1, but he's quick, he's strong, he's mobile, press resistant, which I thought was one of Wijnaldum's best traits. But he's also pretty good in possession as well. He can play a wide range of passes, normally fairly accurate in them. I mean, let's have a look. He's about 91% pass success rate this season, which again, sometimes a really high pass success rate can paint a picture of quite a safe player. A player 5 or 10 yards, just looking to do short balls, keep play ticking over. I think he's capable of that, but I also think he can be a little bit more penetrative as well, which is obviously something that we talked about in the past that has been missing at times in the Liverpool midfield without the likes of Thiago on the pitch. So I think he's just a good age. He's about 25. He just ticks a lot of boxes, Josh, and I think he's a player that there could be this potential realism there in terms of, maybe one day joining Liverpool.
Yeah, no, it's a good shout. He played against Liverpool fairly recently, I think, for AC Milan Champions League twice. So yeah, good player. My choice is, I suppose, even more obvious. If people know Kessie, they'll know this lad. But I've got reasoning behind it. So my shout is Youri Tielemans. And the reason I've gone for him, hear me out on this one, because there'll be immediate fans, I suppose, listening to this. Yeah. The reason I think this is because this summer he will have a year left on his deal. When I say that, Dave, I mean as in a price.
Okay. I thought you meant like people didn't rate him, but yeah,
no.
Sorry, mate. Yeah.
No, I think people will think Leicester will charge, billions for this lad. But this summer he'll have a year left on his deal, and the indication is that he's not going to sign a new one. And given the Leicester model, they will sell him, in my opinion. So, in my opinion, this summer Tielemans leaves Leicester. Liverpool obviously need a midfielder. Tielemans is currently a really good age. He's 24, 25 fairly soon though. And across the board, he's just a very, very attractive player, I think. Last season, he played over 3,000 minutes in the Premier League, featured in all 38 of Leicester's Premier League games, and the season before that, he featured in 37 of Leicester's 38 Premier League games. So you've got a big tick there next to, availability, which is something that we've obviously lost when Wijnaldum's left. And I think generally, if you watch him play, I think he's vaguely similar to Wijnaldum in terms of just having a really adaptable, modern skill set. I think he's very composed. I think he's also quite press resistant. I think his passing range is well in advance of Wijnaldum, to be honest. I think he's probably evolved into Leicester's best player. Leicester had lots of potential when Rodgers first arrived there. They had Harvey Barnes, they had James Maddison, Tielemans. And I think the player who's evolved the most is Tielemans. I think Maddison's stood still a little bit. Barnes stood still a little bit. But I think Tielemans has grown, and he's international. I think Liverpool will be able to get him. Obviously, he's Premier League proven as well, which is a nice thing. And Liverpool got that in Diogo Jota. But I think if you look at Tielemans as a whole and consider that he's out of contract in 2023, I think Liverpool might be able to get him for about 40 million, maybe. And I think if you look at the alternative options, someone like a Florian Neuhaus, maybe, who we've talked about in the past, and who Liverpool have been linked with in the past. I think there's just more risk attached to buying a player like that, considering he hasn't done it in England. I think it's a little bit cliche, but Tielemans is quite clearly proven at a very, very high level. He winning cups for Leicester last season on his own and things like that. And, one of the best players in the Premier League, clearly. Very progressive in his passing. So it's quite a... hasn't really been reported much. I haven't seen any major links, really, with Liverpool and Tielemans this season or anything like that. But I think that's one that could, just out of nowhere, come out as, Liverpool have agreed a deal. Like it did with Jota.
Yeah. And I think it would be a good deal as well. I think obviously he's a really good player. And I guess, which you addressed at the start, I guess why nobody speaks about him more is because you kind of look at it and think, okay, well, he's had a Premier League rival. He's a key player there. They won't let him go cheap. So he's almost on it. You'd admire him, but you'd accept he's not really an option. But as you've just pointed out, that potential is there in the future. And he's definitely someone you could see as a Liverpool midfielder. I don't know if you mentioned it then, Josh. How old is he now?
24.
Yeah, so he feels like he's been around for a little while, but he's still like really good age.
That's what I mean. If you think of the experience he's got, he's played for Leicester, he's played in the Champions League, he's played in the European Championships, played for Monaco, Anderlecht, all of that. Something like eight full seasons, I think he might have under his belt, because he played 2,000 minutes in the Belgian First Division for Anderlecht, age 16. So
Wow.
he's been around forever, mate, but still only 24. And I think if you want to minimise risk attached to buying players, I mean, there's very little risk attached to Tielemans, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's great. He's a really good midfielder. Onto forwards.
Yeah, go on. I'll let you take the lead.
Yeah, so I think again,
what forward have you gone for? Whereabouts?
I've gone through the middle actually.
Okay.
I was tempted to go out wide, but with us talking about Diaz, I thought, you know what, I'll maybe just go through the middle. And again, a familiar name, but someone I feel like can't ignore, and his kind of credentials have improved again, and it's Jonathan David. Have you?
Yeah.
Have you gone for him?
Yeah,
Go on. Well, I'll say a few bits and then I'll pass it over to him. But I think what's good about this, Josh, when it happens, when we do this, is it kind of adds a little bit of weight as to why there's the interest there. Because, you look at him now, he's obviously gone from the Belgian league into Lille. Lille's business always tends to be fairly impressive. Certainly has been with this modern Lille, the kind of structure they've had, they've done really well in terms of rearing players and then selling them for profit. I think he's gone there, having done really well in Belgium, and he's done really well in with Lille as well. Even this season, obviously they won the league title last season. This year they fell off a little bit in terms of competing for the title. They're definitely not going to win it again. I think they're somewhere near mid-table, but he still managed to score 12 goals in 19 appearances, another 3 in the Champions League. He hasn't got any assists, which when we spoke about him, 2 years ago, that he seemed to have a lot of that to his game, because he operated almost like him behind the forwards. He was very versatile, could play like a 10 or as a 9. He's more playing as that out-and-out striker at the moment for Lille, so that probably explains why he's finishing moves rather than helping create them. But he's a really dynamic player. I think he's really dangerous coming short, link and play, but he's also able to run in behind. He's clinical, as we've seen. He's got a lot of traits that would benefit Liverpool's number 9, similar ones to Firmino, but then he seems to just be a lot more clinical. He's still just 21, coming up to 22. And one final thing before I pass over to you, Josh, was, and we don't normally say this with players, but I think it's worth highlighting. When I had a look at his contract, all right, he signed a 5-year contract in 2020, but that'll obviously be Lille protecting their position in terms of sales. He's only on something like 35 grand a week, which, it's It's only about $5,000 more than what you're on a week, Josh. But it's but the point I make, you come to Premier League, you come to Liverpool, that's going to massively shoot up, isn't it? And I know maybe some of the purists would argue it shouldn't be about money, but I think that's going to be another little string in the bow, so to speak, of potentially this deal and how it might benefit Liverpool, because that's not, for the player of his quality, that's a pretty small weekly wage.
Yeah, and when you say it's going to massively shoot up, Liverpool could technically double it, and he'd still be very, very low on Liverpool's earning list. So, yeah, it's a nice thing. Liverpool obviously very focused on keeping the wage built to a certain level and stuff like that. So if we got him in, that'd allow the clubs to do that. But yeah, there's not too much I can add on what you've just said there, to be honest. One element that I do like about his game, or that I don't think you mentioned, is he is very two-footed. So since he moved to Lille, so that's this season and last season, he's scored 25 goals, and you've had 14 with his right foot, 10 with his left foot, and 1 with his head. So I always think that's a nice thing. I think Liverpool think it's a nice thing as well, considering the links to Jared Bowen and considering Jota's signature. Jota's, was very two-footed as well. And as you said, he's just a very, very nice forward. I think Liverpool have generally not signed a single striker since Klopp arrived, and we've been asked questions about that on the show before as to why that's the case. And my response has just generally been, I think Liverpool target these under the radar players, but it's hard to identify an under the radar striker, because if a striker's doing well, he's probably scoring goals, and if a player's scoring goals, everyone knows about him. So it's hard to find a striker who you can get for a reasonable price, who's different under the radar or whatever. But if you look at David, this season currently is the 4th season in a row in which he scored at least 10 non-penalty league goals. So he's developing quite a proven record. He's on 10 at the minute in League One this season without penalties. 13 last season, 15 the season before, and 12 the season before that. And that's in Belgium for 2 seasons and France for 2 seasons. So there's a bit of a proven record there. And in terms of his availability, again, it looks really, really good. Last season, he featured in 37 of Lille's 38 games. And season before, 27. Season before that, 33. And so far this season, he's featured in 19 from a possible 19. So, yeah, he's available all the time. So, I just think, looking at him, considering as well, another major thing, he was on Liverpool's shortlist last season. But Liverpool signed Jota. So, we know he's on Liverpool's shortlist. We know Liverpool are aware of him. Me and Dave have been big fans of him for a while, on this podcast and stuff. His numbers look as good as you're going to get, really, I suppose, in terms of a talent who's got potential, who can maybe make a step up and things. So it just looks like it makes a lot of sense, really, doesn't
it? Yeah, that's it. And there are players who you can kind of find across Europe who are number 9s, who are scoring goals. But the reason we like him is he just has that little bit more. That he kind of has the potential to maybe ease that transition from Firmino because of his profile, and he's quite. I can't think of many equivalents to him out there. Who kind of have that whole package that he has with the goals, and that's why he's such an interesting prospect, and he's at the perfect club really, because Lille will sell. They will accept that he's going to be sold at some point, and it's just where he ends up. And you do kind of see Liverpool as an environment that he could really thrive in.
Yeah, one slight issue maybe is, I think, in comparison to last season, there's probably going to be a bit more competition for this sign. I've seen Arsenal linked with him. Obviously, I think Lacazette runs out of contract this summer, and Aubameyang doesn't look like he's got much of a future there either. So Arsenal might be in for him potentially. I think I've seen him linked with other clubs from Europe, potentially Inter Milan or someone like that. I think I saw him linked with West Ham this month.
Yeah, I saw that one as well.
Yeah, but he's just an interesting player, isn't he? And he was my pick, he was your pick, so I think that obviously is a good thing, I suppose. And it means we can finish the podcast 6 minutes early.
Well, yeah, unless just someone's disappointed, but yeah, we'll add the 6 minutes on another week.
Yeah, I mean, we will be back next week to talk more about transfers type stuff, but rather than doing specifically to Liverpool this summer, we'll just be talking about players across Europe that are taking our fancy. So that typical yearly scouting episode that we seem to do, where we flag players who are potentially the next big thing, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah, Dave, thanks for joining us, mate. It's good to be back.
Yeah. Thank you. All the best, everyone, for the new year, and thanks for listening in to us both.
And yeah, we'll be back next week. So thanks for tuning in, and see you then.